Hey everyone, I am Vito Rivabella, developer advocate here at Alchemy. Of course, as always, thank you so much for tuning in to our latest Twitter Spaces. Today, I had to call some technical reinforcements, getting on the space that brain on legs of my teammate Noah, engineer at Alchemy, and of course the Arbitrum team with two VIS, very important speakers, to discuss a big movement we're all eagerly anticipating, the Ethereum merge. Noah, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hey guys, I'm Noam. I'm an engineer here at Alchemy. I've been working at Alchemy nearly 2 years. Been working pretty closely with the Arbitrum team, supporting Arbitrum One over the past few years, and have been focused on the merge in recent months. So excited to be chatting.
Amazing. Yeah, definitely Noam is the person to go to whenever you have questions about the merge. I ask him questions every day, every single day. Noam, thank you so much for, you know, still talking with me. It's very important.
I love talking with you.
Anyway, stop. We're not friends anymore. Anyway, we all know that the merge isn't just some flake of a speech. It's a result of years of planning, testing, and building by amazing engineers. And it's really the start of the whole new chapter to make Ethereum more scalable, decentralized, and of course secure. To help with a high level overview, we've actually set up a web page that captures a bunch of must know info about the merge, like what is it, how to adapt to it. You can check it out at alchemy.com/the merge. There is a whole guide there. Other than that, Arbitrum, of course, is a central player within the Ethereum ecosystem, being one of the fastest and most used and reliable L2 chains out there. Today, we're going to break this conversation into three main sections. We have Arbitrum today, including the Nitro upgrade, Nova, and of course Odyssey. The merge, including perspectives on preparing your applications and developers for the merge, including testnet. Please go girly, super important. And the future, including features that off-chain labs are looking forward to Ethereum building post-merge, and the concept of maximum extractable value, MEV. Thanks God there's no one here. But before we dive in, let's do a quick round of intros. Harry, do you want to get started? The floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Yeah. So I'm Harry. I'm one of the co-founders and the CTO at Arbitrum. I've now been working on Arbitrum for like I don't even know, like I think almost 5 years now at this point. Uh, and been excited about the merge and about ETH2 for just as long. So really excited to be here.
Amazing. Glad to have you here today. The other VIS, very important speaker today, is Matt Peering. I hope I said your surname correctly. Product manager, Chain Labs. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, it comes up a lot. It's Matt Pairing, but no worries. Yeah, I work on product at Arbitrum. Joined this year. I've been following all this stuff for many years, as many of you, but definitely not on Arbitrum as long as Harry and the rest of the team. But yeah, joined, support the team. I've been really excited to kind of get some of this stuff that we're going to talk through today shipped, including Nitro, Nova, our other chain. But yeah, super excited to be here and eagerly anticipating the merge as well.
Amazing. So I think we can get started. Noah, do you want to kick off with some questions for the Arbitrum team?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Vito. Cool. Harry, Matt, good to be chatting as always. Let's start way back. So correct me if I'm wrong, but Arbitrum's changed a lot since the early days. And fun fact for the audience, but Arbitrum was actually conceived of before Ethereum launched, meaning your team knew blockchains would be around and they would have scalability issues. So could you talk a little bit about the history of Arbitrum, how you launched Arbitrum 1 on the Arbitrum Classic nodes, and then the Nitro release that you guys just upgraded to and what that means for the ecosystem?
Yeah. I mean that's a big topic. I like it. So yeah, I think first of all, exactly right. So basically, sort of, and not myself, but one of my co-founders, Ed Felton, who's our chief scientist, in I think it was late 2014, if I remember correctly. So sort of while Ethereum was being talked about a bunch in development, but before it had launched, came up with this idea, and it was actually used as the idea for a class project because Princeton had like an advanced topics in blockchain course back in 2014 that was doing blockchain stuff already, which was pretty cool. And then sort of like I think at that time there were undergrads working on it. It was a kind of school project, so it did not exactly look like it did today. Although there's a lot in common for sure. but it sort of ended up getting relatively dropped until around I think 2017, when kind of the moment was a lot more sort of ripe, and there was a lot of sort of, you know, the blockchain ecosystem was obviously growing and taking off, and sort of the value was becoming more and more clear. And we, Stephen Goldfeder and I, went approached Ed, who had recently gotten back from a gig in the White House, and and we all started talking about this cool idea and got ridiculously excited. And then it's been basically just working on that nonstop ever since. Um, so I think kind of in terms of the kind of second part, in terms of so we launched the Arbitrum One chain a little over a year ago now. I know that just because we launched Arbitrum Nitro on the 1 year anniversary of launching Arbitrum One, um, and sort of the interesting thing there was when we built out kind of the Arbitrum Classic stack, and kind of launched Arbitrum One. That was sort of the first time anybody had actually figured out how to do real proofs for optimistic rollups on chain. It was sort of a new frontier, and we were kind of figuring out a lot of stuff for the first time. And we figured out, I'd say, some like pretty good solutions for it. Like overall, like, when you're solving a problem for the first time, it's hard to have sort of the perfect solution, and it worked, but it had sort of all of these various issues, and the not particularly nice to run the software. I don't need to tell you guys. Um, and so I think we almost immediately set out to take all of the everything we had learned from working on on Arbitrum. Well, at the time it was just called Arbitrum. Now we call it Arbitrum Classic. And we started out working on this whole new iteration, Nitro, which kind of we were able to build upon all the knowledge we had picked up, but ended up sort of doing a huge amount of from scratch work over the last year, which we finally launched just about a week ago.
Awesome. Thanks for the overview, and congrats on that launch. Do you want to talk a little bit about the metrics you guys have seen on the Arbitrum network since launching?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and also happy to if Matt wants to jump in here at all. But I mean, I'd say overall, sort of, we've seen a big growth in transaction count. I think overall, sort of, heavily linked towards like two. I mean, I think kind of a couple main factors. One being sort of just it being a huge moment for the ecosystem, something that we've been talking about for a long time, and something that just sort of had a lot of excitement associated. And so kind of just that sort of social element, and the other being that it's just like a hell of a lot faster to use. So from a user perspective, I think there's sort of been a lot of kind of positive, a lot of excitement surrounding just the experiential improvement that has gotten sort of a lot of users wanting to jump on more and more. That, along with sort of the third element, which is sort of really big, which is it's way cheaper now. It was already pretty cheap, but a lot of the improvements we ship with Nitro brought down both sort of the L2 cost of execution, and using a bunch of fancy compression, bringing down the actual data posting cost itself. And when prices are cheaper, people transact more.
Totally. And I'm excited to kind of double click on that a little bit later. But now, taking a step back real quick, maybe for some folks newer to the space in the audience, could you really quickly just go over what exactly is a layer two, why we care about it, what an optimistic rollup is, and how your fraud proof engine works?
Oh man, you guys are not going easy on me. Um,
I was thinking the
Absolutely.
same. It's amazing.
No, this is great. So first of all, yeah, what's a layer two? And I think there's been a lot of kind of contentious debate over
Yeah.
what a layer two is for a lot of time, for a long time now. Roughly speaking, it's to me sort of a separate chain that inherits its security from from a separate blockchain, so that doesn't have sort of its own consensus. It's not sort of like a separate chain with its own proof of stake system. It's a chain where sort of the consensus is built on the underlying consensus of Ethereum, and it can derive its security. Now, this is getting more and more complicated, And I think maybe later we'll talk a little bit about Nova, which is kind of introduces some additional trust assumptions. It's hard to draw a hard line, but that's sort of the high level idea. And sort of there's sort of this ecosystem, broadly speaking, of these things that are emerging, all based on top of Ethereum. Since I think it's our view that that the Ethereum ecosystem is the place to be. The by far the most successful, and there's a long history of layer twos. Before rollups existed, for a long time we just had state channels. Then we had Plasma. Rollups finally came around. There's been a very long history of this idea of sort of how do we get more out of the limited resources that Ethereum has. Kind of the main thing I think that's been sort of had the most attention and had the most success, which sort of is what kind of is our rollups, which is basically this category of systems that execute off chain and then prove back to Ethereum what the result of executing is. Um, those sort of optimistic and ZK are sort of two different methods of doing this proving. Where with ZK is sort of the relatively simpler to describe, but much more complex to implement, where you somehow create a succinct proof and pass it to Ethereum that what you did off chain is correct. Sounds simple, but except for the whole like how do you actually do that? Optimistic rollups instead take this approach where you instead just make a claim and claim on Ethereum what's correct, and then somebody else can come around and challenge that claim. And Arbitrum, both Classic and Nitro, are built out this system for an interactive back and forth process that the person who made the claim and the person who's disputing the claim can engage in, which will finally prove to Ethereum which of those people is telling the truth, and resolve that dispute. Let's see. I think did I get to all of the parts of the question? Or
no, that was fantastic. Thanks, Harry. Matt, anything you want to add there?
Thank you.
I mean, I would add that this is what we believe, and I think the Ethereum community believes is kind of like the future scaling in many ways, right? We need increased throughput. We need increased capacity. You can't solve that at the base layer in a large way. So that's essentially what the solution is for, and that's why rollups exist.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just at a really high level for folks who
totally
aren't familiar with the concept.
Yeah. So summarizing that, essentially, we're moving some execution off to a separate system to allow for higher throughput for end users. So end users see higher throughput, cheaper fees, and the same level of security as they would on L1 Ethereum, which, taking a step back, a lot of folks call this the blockchain scalability trilemma. There's three axes here: scalability, decentralization, and security. And you kind of want to maximize all three components of the system. And Ethereum now is decentralized and secure, but obviously not very scalable. And so what Arbitrum does is it decouples the consensus from layer 1 Ethereum with the execution on layer 2 Arbitrum in order to increase the overall throughput for users. A third component of this, so we have consensus, we have execution, and then we also have what's called data availability, meaning if I send a transaction, it's persisted in the ledger, and I want to go get that data at a point in the future, can I get that data? And right now you can, but blockchain ledgers grow indefinitely. So over time, it becomes harder and harder to have the hardware supporting these larger ledgers, which is a good segue to the Nova chain, which takes a new perspective on data availability. Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit? Explain what it is, why it's important, and why end users should care?
Quick thing, I'm just plugging at the top of the space. We just pinned a new tweet where you can ask any question to the Arbitrum team. I know this is a very technical space, so if you have questions, just feel free and drop in mine there because I have plenty of that.
Very cool. Yeah. So Nova. So basically, I mean, it's interesting with Arbitrum 1. Arbitrum 1 is massively cheaper than Ethereum, but for certain use cases, it's still way too expensive. So if you want to do kind of gaming, if you want to do kind of social stuff, having sort of, if you're doing DeFi, then if you're paying, 10 cents for a transaction, no problem. If you're playing a game, it could very well be a limiting factor. And so sort of Nova is kind of interesting in that sort of it's our answer towards how can you have sort of quite high security, but weakening slightly from sort of that full roll-up level of security in order to open up a chain to all sorts of projects that just can't launch on Arbitrum 1 because they're still priced out. And so basically, sort of, you have this world where with Arbitrum 1, the main cost of using it um, is posting the data back to Ethereum, because one of the core properties of rollups is that they use Ethereum for data availability by just posting as call data all user transactions. Nitro adds compression to this, but still fundamentally we're posting everything. This is expensive. Um, and so if you can basically avoid that cost, then you can massively decrease the amount that users need to pay and make a lot of stuff viable. And in short, sort of the answer to how we do this with Nova is this concept of any trust. So we have an external committee that can basically just attest that data is available and then generate a signature saying it is. But the really cool thing about this committee is rather than sort of some system where you're voting and you need sort of 2/3 honesty assumptions, and then you worry a lot about sort of, well, is the committee going to turn malicious? With any trust, you only need to assume that there's a single honest member of the committee. So as long as there's anybody you trust who's on the committee, then the chain will be secure, which is sort of a much more reasonable assumption than adding on sort of a whole sort of additional consensus trust assumption. And basically, using that relatively minimal assumption, we can, in the optimistic case, which is most of the time, make things way cheaper.
Awesome. So summarizing that, instead of relying on these traditional optimistic rollups, which post fraud proofs to L1 Ethereum, let's say if a transaction costs 10 cents, a majority of that, probably over 9 cents, the cost of that is attributed to posting that data to L1 Ethereum. Now, instead, you post it to a committee of trusted data availability providers. And as long as one committee member is available, your system will be secure. So you've drastically reduced the fees, and that enables new paradigms like gaming and other things that might need lower transaction fees. Is that correct, Harry?
Exactly. Yeah, and it's like that. That's just one. The only sort of minor correction there is basically sort of if none of them are available, it's fine. If everybody goes down, then we fall back to Ethereum, which means that sort of even if the committee disappears, essentially the chain just can fall back to being a roll up, which is really nice. So the only sort of extra assumption is that if 100% of the committee are malicious, then they're able to sort of lie about a batch being available. But that's sort of the only additional security assumption there.
Amazing. Super exciting stuff. Moving on a bit, you guys are planning on launching Arbitrum Odyssey. I know we've talked a lot about the core infrastructure with Arbitrum 1, Arbitrum Nitro, Arbitrum Nova. Odyssey happens more at application level. Could you guys talk a little bit about that and what that means for Arbitrum developers and Arbitrum end users?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple months now already. Wow. We had the Odyssey, and we had a couple activities users could go through. We had Bridge Week, and then we had a second week where folks could participate in some more complex transactions. And we kind of ran into some congestion, and we paused it to make sure that the experience for kind of users and developers was not too affected because of this interaction. And now, we've gotten a lot of interest and a lot of traction, and we know there's pressure to resume this. So, while I can't comment on a specific date, we are getting close to deciding on what we want to do and when we want to resume it. And so, I think what that means for developers is, there's going to be increased chain activity because there's a lot of interest. Luckily, we just shipped Nitro, which has been mentioned either in this call or in, Stephen and Harry gave a talk on Bankless the other week. We kind of went over how it, increases overall capacity by around 7 to 10 times. So, we're hoping that this is a much, much better experience, even if there's more traffic. And so, what that means for devs is, hopefully, this isn't something that is going to be too crazy. But for users, it's we're going to make things a bit more streamlined. We're going to have a lot of interesting things for you to do and take part in. As you might or may not be familiar with, every week you participate in, there's a chance to win an NFT as long as you participate with some hidden prizes kind of baked in. And we're obviously iterating on the structure. But yeah, so it's a pretty ecosystem wide activity. It's pretty cool. It's very organic in how it kind of came to be, which from an internal perspective has been really interesting to kind of observe. But yeah,
Awesome. For those listening, follow the Arbitrum Twitter account to get more updates on Odyssey and when that rolls out. Cool. Moving on to everyone's favorite topic, the merge. How should Arbitrum developers and users think about and prepare for the merge? Do they have to do anything special? Is there anything that rhymes with maybe Zurli that they have to think about? Harry, Matt, any thoughts there?
Ah,
I like
yeah,
that.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so overall, sort of, Arbitrum users need to think about very little with the merge, which is really cool. The sort of experience on Arbitrum won't change at all. Um, Kind of, you'll have the knowledge that sort of the technical stack you're running on is a lot greener and more efficient, which is very cool. But in terms of sort of actual impact on Arbitrum devs, um, there won't be really sort of anything visible, and the system should just continue functioning as expected all the way through. Assuming, which I fully expect, everything goes smoothly on the L1 level. I think connected to the merge, as I think there was a subtle hint in this direction. I think we're both trying to kind of get users kind of aware of the fact that Ethereum overall is massively simplifying down the craziness with the like 50 million different test nets that we've developed over time, and trying to kind of simultaneously get users migrated over to Gorilla, which is one that actually has already undergone the merge. So if you're using Arbitrum on Gorilla or using L1 Gorilla, you're post merge, um, and getting them off of things like Rinkeby that are are relatively not long for this world.
Amazing. Yeah. To reiterate, if you guys are developing on any testnet in the space, please make sure that it derives security from L1 Gurley. That will be the main supported application testnet after the merge. If you're developing on Kovan or on Arbitrum on Rinkeby, please migrate over to Gurley. Anything else to add there?
Oh, I was just going to say, and develop and testing on testnets is a great idea. Definitely highly recommend using testnets. It's a great way to get a very realistic kind of confirmation as to how your application will look when it's on mainnet.
Yeah, absolutely. And to build on top of that too, I'm really excited for a state where we have one primary testnet, which is Gurley, because right now, for example, if you're an application developer, Aave is on Kovan and Arbitrum is on Rinkeby, and if you want the mainnet like composability that blockchains offer, it's hard to get that in a fragmented testnet ecosystem. So with everyone migrating Gurley, you'll be able to compose all these building blocks in testnets like you would in mainnet and test and compose much more powerful applications. So excited to see how that plays out. Um, Cool. So we have the merge around the corner. The merge, like you mentioned, doesn't impact Arbitrum users and developers too much, but the merge sets the table for a lot of follow-up improvements to L1 Ethereum that might end up affecting Arbitrum pretty substantially. Is there any top feature or EIP on Ethereum that you're looking forward to most post-merge? I know things like proto-dank sharding, proposal-builder separation, and account abstraction will all impact Arbitrum. Are there any that you're particularly keeping eyes on?
Oh yeah, totally. No, I mean, and that's a great list. Like I think front and center in our minds is definitely proto dank sharding EIP 4844, which a lot of work has been going into, and which will be when it chips a massive decrease in the cost of using rollups. I think the target we really have in mind for rollups these days is not just sort of being a better experience than using Ethereum directly, but being sort of Ethereum's way of outcompeting other alternative L1 blockchains. And so this is an area where really sort of the L1s and the L2s are working together in order to make that possible. I think that's sort of the biggest thing. Although I'll say, like personally, I'm also very excited about like all things account abstraction. That's one of those sort of magic kind of proposals that will make sort of the user experience massively better. I think that one area that kind of we think about a lot, I think about a lot, is sort of how do we get way more users using blockchain stuff? And I think that sort of UX improvements are sort of the biggest answer there to me, making it so that sort of things just work a lot more cleanly. And things like account abstraction are are a really big deal in that regard. One of the interesting things there is basically sort of Arbitrum one doesn't need Ethereum to adopt account abstraction for us to support it in L2, but we really don't want to support we really want to be kind of deeply the same as Ethereum, which means that we don't really like the idea of sort of adopting anything that isn't also going to be adopted by Ethereum itself, because that would be really confusing to users. So this is something that I think we're both sort of excited about for Ethereum, but also excited to have the opportunity to ship in Arbitrum as well.
You must be psychic, because that was my next question. I was going to ask, is there a world where Arbitrum gets ahead on the user experience, given that we're kind of moving towards a paradigm where L1 Ethereum is a settlement layer that provides security for these rollups that are more user facing. So whereas L1 Ethereum's responsibilities might be more like consensus security infrastructure, L2 might be more focused on the user experience. So do you ever see a tipping point past what you say, hey, there's so many users on Arbitrum, the Ethereum L1 is risky to edit and the roadmap moves slower, let's put in more user experience facing features like account abstraction in early?
So yes, but yes, but I think that it needs to be done in a way with sort of broad ecosystem consensus. You need the wallets involved. You need the programming languages involved. You need kind of all the developer tooling involved. I don't want to see a world where sort of there's massive fragmentation every L2 that you're on. Like, I don't want to have a world where ideally where there's like a ton of differences between kind of developing on Arbitrum and developing on Optimism. So I think sort of like figuring out basically a standards process is pretty critical path to sort of making the world not a like too crazy place.
Totally.
Yeah.
And just double clicking on something that you mentioned earlier, for the folks that don't know about EIP 4844, it's called proto dank sharding. At a high level, what it does is it makes the data that we talked about earlier that rollups post to L1. So Arbitrum now posts a lot of call data to layer one, and that's the primary source of the transaction fee on layer two. And it makes posting this data in roughly an order of magnitude cheaper. So we'll see a corresponding decrease in transaction cost on layer two. Super exciting stuff. Will enable a lot of throughput on rollups moving forward. Cool. So we've talked.
I would just add one more point.
Yeah,
sorry
thanks.
about this, like as it relates to the merge. No worries. Yeah. I mean, Harry covered a lot of the things we're excited about. I think 48, 44, 43, 37, etc. Like those three that you mentioned, and the proposer builder separation, like all very, very interesting. And I think why it's related to the merge, as you kind of hinted at, is we've had this core team outside of our off-chain labs, but actually at the Ethereum Foundation working on this massive change. Where essentially, they're going to implement this monumental upgrade with no network downtime, at least in the optimistic sense. Once that happens, right, it actually has it opens up a lot more time for them and for us to kind of work on these new issues. And so that's what we're most excited about, right? Like to have ecosystem coordination and time to focus on things outside of this. So, I mean, from if you're a user, if you're thinking about this at a high level, and aside from the kind of like, energy efficiency standpoint, there's the idea of like brain bandwidth, right? Folks will be able to think about something else for the first time in a while. So we're pretty hyped about that.
Yeah, super exciting. Definitely agreed with that. Cool. So we talked a lot about the Ethereum roadmap. I'm curious a little bit about the post Nitro Arbitrum roadmap. What are you guys most excited about bringing to users? Some feedback I got from the team is maybe sequencer decentralization, rollups on different L1s, improved fraud proofs. Anything jump to mind about things that you guys are super bullish on and want to bring out soon?
Yeah, I mean, basically all of that.
Nice.
I would say yes.
No, it's interesting. I think Nitro kind of puts getting Nitro out the door really puts us in kind of a very nice place, which is that sort of we've kind of, I think, created a lot of kind of stability in sort of the tech we have today. That Nitro sort of solved a lot of kind of active issues that users were running into day to day using Arbitrum. And I think that, like, first and foremost, like our priority is always like solving problems that existing users are having. But I think now that Nitro has in a way certainly kind of covered a lot of that. I think and I think there's I could never stop making. There are just so many parallels basically between the Nitro upgrade and the merge. So I mean, I'd say sort of like the mental bandwidth thing that Matt was saying about the kind of ETH core devs, I think is also probably true for our team. That sort of overall kind of the we want to do all the things that sort of like continue pushing on this sort of final image of sort of the fully kind of the perfect kind of end state of rollups. I think there's like a variety of things that need to get done first. Sequencer decentralization is a great example, and that sort of overall that's a big focus point, along with sort of continuing to push the boundaries on execution. Nitro got us to around we are kind of running Nitro with around 7x sort of worth of capacity compared to Ethereum. That's great, but like that's not going to last forever. And sort of if that gets used up, then L2 gas prices will rise because sort of Arbitrum could get congested just like Ethereum. It just has a lot more space. And so I think there's a lot of stuff that's kind of we're very interested in basically figuring out. Okay, so maybe Nitro gets us to being able to support like 10x the number of users that Ethereum can today. What's our next 10x after that? And we there's a lot of thinking and a lot of work to be done there.
Absolutely. Pretty excited thinking about that next 10x too. Cool. I know we have 5 minutes left, so let's do a quick fire round of questions, both to you, Harry, and Matt, and then I'll turn it over to Vito with questions from the audience. Sound good, guys?
Works for me.
Sounds great.
Amazing.
Sweet. All right, quick fire. So, Matt, let's start with you. What's one new dApp on Arbitrum that made you go, wow?
I get hit for this. We had a product called Rage Trade that launched, I think, yesterday or the day before. Found that pretty interesting.
What'd you say it's called? Sorry.
It's called Rage Trade.
Cool. And if you had to
Yeah.
describe it really quickly, what would you say that it does?
Think about it as I would say the way they describe themselves is like perpetual swaps on omnichain in a way. So
Cool.
yeah, another DeFi product. Sorry.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's exciting. How about you, Harry? Anything to in mind?
I'm gonna say nothing specific because my favorite thing is basically just that like every day there's something new. Just the number of new projects launching is like wild. So all of it.
Awesome. Good answer. Speaking of new dApps, are there any dApps that you guys have thought about that you wished existed?
Yes, but I think the work that we're seeing is really good and really exciting. I think there's a lot, as a person who lives in a world where many things are kind of gate kept by large organizations. Anything we can do to kind of work with legacy institutions to make things more efficient is always really exciting to me. I mean, the innovation in DeFi has been amazing to see, and I think every day we see new things. There's some processes that people have to deal with, whether that be healthcare, whether that be registration for driving, things like that. Very, very practical things. I think there's a lot of space that we still have yet to explore. It's obviously much more difficult to make any movement there, but that stuff really excites me because I think that affects the most amount of people.
Yep, I agree with that. Is there any developer tool that would make your guys' lives easier?
I mean, I would say overall, and a lot of this is something that like we're going to be working on. Like Nitro opens up the door to like massively improve developer tooling on Arbitrum. The AVM, which was like kind of the core of the classic stack, was like really weird and non-traditional. And things like, for instance, like network forking were really hard. With Nitro, everything is now possible. To build way more on top of existing Ethereum tooling, which is really exciting. So, sort of Ethereum tooling compatibility with Nitro in general is like an area I'm really excited about.
Yeah, and I would just add any we see a lot of stuff with monitoring and analytics, but continual development and dependency management from a software supply chain security perspective, work there always very important, very very useful for developers.
Sweet. And then last question before I turn it over to Vito. Are there any NFT projects on Arbitrum that you're particularly excited about? Harry, I see your PFP. Matt, would love your thoughts too.
I'm agnostic in the NFT space. I watch, I observe. As you can see, my profile picture is just an edited picture of me, so not a lot of strong opinions there. But Harry, you might have different thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say broadly speaking, like I'm a big fan of the projects that are sort of doing more than just images, that are sort of trying to create value, trying to create ecosystem, trying to create utility. I think that's sort of like where the frontier is heading and where sort of all the cool stuff lies.
Sweet. Thanks for that quick fire round, guys. Vito, back over to you, man.
That was an amazing space, folks. I learned a lot. Thank you so much, Noam, for guiding us through all the changes that we're seeing thanks to the merge and all the work that Arbitrum is doing. Amazing explanation. Unfortunately, we don't really have time for the questions, but what we can do is answer them in the comments right after this space. What I want to know, though, is where can people find out more about Arbitrum's resources, community, people working on it?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to arbitrum.io, we've got our whole bunch of resources there. We've got our documentation. If you go to offchainlabs.com, you can meet the team working on it, and learn about kind of the history of the company. I think one thing, if you want to get involved with us personally, we'll be at DevCon next month. We're holding a hackathon. We announced it on Monday, so if you're going to be there in person, it's one way you can get kind of more deeply involved than what you can see online.
Also, follow our Twitter, jump on Discord. We have like a pretty damn popular Discord, so always a great place to go. And yeah, we're everywhere, so find us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Make sure to follow Arbitrum, Harry, Noah, and Matt. And also, thank you so much for everyone to listen to our space today. I see Radio Shock, folks. Everyone's seen your post recently. I see Chris, Philippe, Irina, and so on. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Remember, if you want to know more about the merge and what's going on, what's going to happen next, go on alchemy.com/the merge. We wrote a short guide to walk you through all the changes that are going to happen in the next few days, weeks, and months. And once again, thank you so much for this super insightful space. Learned a lot. Anything you want to add, folks?
I mean, I just want to thank you guys for hosting. This was a lot of fun. So really appreciate you guys putting this together.
Yeah, same here.
Enjoyed chatting as always, guys. Appreciate you guys coming on.